So we've had a long day of walking around campus and we've taken refuge up on this hill that is next to the football stadium, and I think there's a game tomorrow, so there's quite a bit of ambient noise around of preparations of tailgating and all sorts of things. But what we're here for is what's in the background there, which is the Lyndon Baines Johnson School of Public Policy, also his presidential library, and then there's quite a lovely fountain down there, but it's pretty exposed, so we decided to sit up here in the live oaks in the embrace of the trees and rest our feet a little bit. So I made one of my little love things to overlook this hill, and got some pink quartz from through the gravel and some of the live oak leaves and some sticks, and put together a little offering, and sprinkled in some rose petals and cedar buds from Rosetta Tharpe's cemetery up in Philly, mixing the things, because I think what's really important, why we chose this spot to talk about, is that the blockchain is central to impact investing, because it's all about data, and it's framed as doing well by doing good, making money by helping people in need, or helping address environmental problems. Of course, all of it has to be tracked for these markets, and all of the tracking systems are inherently not sustainable and put those who are receiving help under digital surveillance, so that it's sort of a mixed bag in that impact space. And it's helping remake the world as this planetary computer, which is really the antithesis of what we have here on this beautiful hill with the light breeze. But where did this all come from? And my perspective is, as someone who's from Philadelphia, and a city where poverty management is a real thing, and not that anyone gets into this sector because they feel like taking advantage. It's just the way the machine is built, right? I mean, people don't go into social work or healthcare or education because they're looking to get one over on their fellow human being. For the most part, people go into it for the right reasons, and the way that the machine is set up is that it kind of grinds people up, both the people who need the help and the people who are providing the services, because then it's, if you see that building over there, it's sort of the height of like bureaucracy. I'm sure like architecturally it's very interesting, but if you sort of wanted a non-personal bureaucratic look at the world, it might maybe look like that building, right? Like it's almost built for the digital era. It's darks and lights, ones and zeros, marching, like literally the windows, the zeros, and the lines in between the ones, and this long owing to the horizon. You can't even see how far this building goes. It's just always ones and zeros. And like, how do you be human in that kind of a space? Like, walking in as a human being essentially disrupts this very abstract modernist vision of a world where everything is just so, and the reality is that people aren't just so. People are unexpected and messy and beautiful, and they certainly don't look like a building like that. And not to say the library itself, it's quite fascinating. If you look, it almost looks like when you if anybody saw like the movie WALL-E, like these robots, these sort of humanoid robots, these abstracted things, is that it's very tall and contained in this white marble, and at the top is this overlook window that almost looks like the panopticon, the totalitarian presence overlooking the world and keeping an eye on everything. So it's an interesting space to have this conversation. And I mean, those of you who have listened to me before know a lot about what I talk about, human capital bonds and engineering people as data, and where that's going with internal and biosensors and wearable technology. And but I just want to sort of hit home, because it will run on blockchain, and in concurrent with this Texas Blockchain Conference the last several days, I know this is virtual and it's international, but the European Venture Philanthropy Alliance, which is led by Ronald Cohen, EVPA, and GSG, which is sort of Global Social Impact Group, have been having a conference about impact investing, and I'm on their email list, so I get their emails daily, with updates about all these quotes about how if we just had more data, we would solve the world's problems and everything would be good and we could channel capital appropriately. But then we have to, again, ask if that's the world that we want to live in. Is that the world? And I would say, ironically, that one of the first ones, they have these infographics where they draw up the day as pictures. And the email was actually sent out with a picture where there's quite a number of misspellings and things, and someone had edited it and pointed out the edits. But when it went out not the corrected version, it went out the messy version, right? And so, I think that on the one hand, it's probably slightly embarrassing for the people who ran this conference and accidentally sent out the wrong email. And we've all done that. We're all human. We all push the button before we should have. But that gives me hope, because while on the one hand, this system seems so overwhelming, like they've got it all locked up, right? They've got the buildings and they've got the conferences and they've got the capital, and for the most part, it all looks so nice. And that's the thing. We're walking around this UT Austin campus, and it's lovely. I mean, it would be a lovely place to send your kid, and it's got every landscaping and beautiful buildings and amenities. None of these things are happening in places that you would imagine as sort of sinister, dark places. They're all out in the open. But because the information is siloed and people are siloed from each other and there's no incentive to put the pieces together, those people who can stay in the beautiful spaces making the big plans and the public social policies will continue to do so. And then the people who are dispossessed and living under highway overpasses and get screened with their biometrics and put on a QR code, which is what we'll talk about next over at Dell Medical Center, the ID 2020 My Pass Alliance. It's quite a difference between if you're someone who's, well, I guess it's hard to say. I mean, probably all of these people are going to be barcoded eventually. You'll just be barcoded as the person with the access to the places where the policies are made at the table and the people who aren't. And I would just recommend for some folks, there's a book that I read summer before last called From the War on Poverty to the War on Crime. And it's by Elizabeth Hinton, and she's out of Harvard. In a retrospect, I can see how that book is probably in some ways doing sort of a soft preparation for impact investing. And she doesn't really get into that at all. But what she does do is she spends a lot of time looking at the Great Society and these programs that we all imagine to be uplifting for people in need, right? In ways of addressing longstanding racial injustice and impoverishment. But what she does in her book is she pulls a lot of primary source material that talks about how a lot of the offers of help actually further expanded the carceral state, the police state, that people would be offered housing assistance, but then the housing would come with police officers. Students would be offered after school programs, but again, those would be embedded in community policing efforts. And so it was all conditional, and it was all sort of framed under this understanding that the cities were up in arms for very real reasons over the lives that people were being forced to live. And there were riots, and they didn't want that to happen. But they didn't necessarily want to fix the problems, the fundamental problems. They just wanted to manage them better. And they managed them through a lot of social programs that ended up growing poverty in many respects. And I think that is an important lesson to learn as we see all the blockchains coming online, and we see the smart contracts coming online, and that blockchain identities and all of these things, is that we need to learn the lessons of the Great Society and understand that they actually were about expanding the surveillance network. And now we've got surveillance beyond anybody's wildest dreams, although it's often couched as convenience and efficiency. But when AI is ultimately in charge of everything, where does that leave us? So that's, I guess, my 2 cents for LBJ and the Great Society and how that relates to impact investing and blockchain, and that there's probably no better place to say it than up on this hill where you can have some distance from it and actually see it with a little more clarity for what it is, because it's not a human landscape. It's a very It's a landscape that makes a statement about state power, really, about the power of the system, but it's not really built for people. So we need a world that's built for not just people, but natural relationships, both among people and planet, not the decentralized web they're putting in.